I've said enough. Mary Kay, I'd like to introduce Mary Kay. Mary Kay is, as I said before, used to be our financial officer. She's a great lady, good friend, and I appreciate her coming.
Thank you, Steve. As he said, I was with the school district about 3 years. Before that, for about 6 years, I audited, and I did a lot of records and that type of stuff. Looked at internal controls on records. Spent a lot of time in banking, so that's where my background comes from. And hopefully some of the things that I learned while I did that will be beneficial to y'all. That's what we're going to try to do. You have several pieces of stacks of paper. This one is Lawton Public Schools sanctioning policy. This is what they keep in their policy book, and this is what you're responsible for doing. And we'll go over this a little bit as part of the presentation, but I wanted you to have a copy of it. The second one, this is the presentation I'm going to give tonight. I gave it to you so you could take notes if you wanted to, so that you'll have them for later. The third one that we're going to talk about are these forms. Now, these forms are not required by Lawton Public Schools at all. They're just forms that you can use if they are beneficial to you after we talk tonight, okay? And I think we have, PTA has a president, and they have a book of policies and procedures that's very helpful. Booster Club does not have that. PTA sanctioning is simply the official recognition that the organizations in the schools are working together for the benefit of the children. And why do we have to do it? It's because the law requires it. It requires annual board approval. So every year you have to get your group has to get re-sanctioned. It requires close communication between your club and school officials so that you know that you're doing what you need to do to stay sanctioned. This is sanctions are contingent on some of these requirements. Get ready to go through it. It must be managed and operated by adults. Can't be managed and operated by children. It must provide structure to include officers' names and addresses. This is stuff that you'll fill out on your sanctioning form. Details of election process, how you elect your officers. Length of the officers' terms. Purpose and goals of the organization. That's very important because when you set those purposes and goals for that organization, that's the only thing you're sanctioned to do. So if you're sanctioned to help run the raise money for the football booster club, you can't decide you're just going to go raise money for the soccer club. Whatever you say your purpose and goal is, that's what you're limited to. It also has to have breakdown of dues structure, how you charge people to be members of your organization. And it has to have itemized projections of expenditures, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we go over the form. It must include one representative of the school district. And I know sometimes I've heard before when I've given these classes that often that's not the case. But you need one representative from the school building where you're sanctioned to be involved in the organization. You can't do any fundraising during school hours unless you have approval of the principal. If you have the approval of the principal, that's okay. No school materials can be used to help the organization. In other words, y'all can't go run copies on a copy machine, use the school's paper, that type of stuff. And the reason for that is that we have laws that we have to go by and appropriated funds, and we cannot use those funds to support booster. It has to go to the kids in their education. It has to, the fundraising must be used to achieve the stated purpose of that club. There can be no administrative fees. So that means that you can't pay yourself. Big disappointment. You have to do this for free. The contributions have to comply with Title IX, and that is that boys and girls are handled exactly the same. Okay? Projects which affect school property must have prior approval of the superintendent. If you want to go in and you want to put a nice bench in front of the sign at the school or whatever, you can't do that unless the superintendent approves it. So you would go to your principal and tell him what you want to do, and he'll pass that on to the superintendent, and the superintendent will approve that. You have to maintain bank and financial records. Very important. One thing that we found when there were problems in a booster or a PTA when we got to looking and trying to find out what the problem was, we couldn't tell because there were no bank records, no financial records to speak of.